All right. Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Minding Mind podcast, where we live life with ease, connection, and permission to just be. I'm your host, Evelyn LeVasseur, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm sitting down and chatting with Alice Rizzi, psychologist and mindfulness coach. And I cannot wait to talk about this because mind to me is where it's at. If you're not present, you're missing out every single time. Before we start, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Alice. So Dr. Alice Rizzi is a licensed psychologist and mindfulness coach who helps ambitious, heart-led women create the impact they want without the burnout and the overwhelm. Hallelujah. She is passionate about showing people what a superpower mindfulness is and how it can help you experience more peace, joy, and freedom. And let me tell you, I can vouch for that. I can vouch for that because I can say that I lived so much of my life constantly trying to be who I thought I was supposed to be, constantly trying to, I guess, be the person that I thought I was supposed to be to feel the things that I wanted to feel, right? To feel loved, to feel wanted, to feel respected. But all that like chase for those feelings left me disconnected from those feelings. I couldn't possibly love myself the way that I want to if I put everyone else's opinions of who I was above my own. So I feel like this conversation is going to be so good. And like we said, or you said, you mentioned in our pre-recording that even though we all have different journeys and different stories, like the pain that we feel is the same, right? We all kind of we can relate. What even when a woman tells a totally different story, I can relate to the feeling that she has in the moments. So welcome to the show. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so excited to be here and to talk with you today.
Awesome. So how about, I know that you are a licensed psychologist. Can you tell us a little bit about that work and how you have incorporated mindfulness, I guess, in your practice and outside of your practice as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I first learned about mindfulness when I was about 20 years old, still in undergrad. And it was just like a teeny tiny portion of one of my psych classes. And I thought, how cool. This promises inner peace. If I just do whatever XYZ, I will be a peaceful individual. That was the thinking back then, right? From the 20-year-old. And so I started doing a little bit more research. I started reading a little bit and I was like, okay, it's not as simple or easy as I thought. It's not like a 1, 2, 3, meditate for 15 minutes and then I'm an entirely different person. But I did start seeing little glimpses of that. So, for example, when I did practice some mindfulness, I felt more joyful. I felt more connected. I felt more present. And even though it was like little tiny hits of that feeling, I thought to myself, this is really cool. I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm curious what's going to happen in the long run if I keep doing it. And what I ended up seeing in my life is that the more I practiced it, the more joyful I felt, the more grateful I felt, the more peaceful I did feel. So, now it's been almost 15 years since I first discovered it. And am I an enlightened human being? No. And I don't think we really ever get to that place. But I am 100% more peaceful, more joyful, more grateful, more conscious, more present before.
Before we get into like the nitty-gritty of like the change, can you kind of just give like a little, I guess, a summary in a sense of what does mindfulness actually mean for a human being?
Yeah.
And like, how do you put that into practice?
Absolutely. So over the years, I've developed my own definition for mindfulness, and it kind of is like a synthesis of things that I've read, that I've heard other people say. To me, mindfulness is the quality of being present in the moment with the following 6 factors that I found: awareness, acceptance, kindness, compassion, curiosity, and non-judgment. So for anybody listening, don't get overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to memorize those qualities. They're just the qualities that I found. When I practice, I become more aware. I become more accepting. I develop more curiosity. I am able to be kinder and more compassionate towards myself and other people. And so I started incorporating different kinds of mindfulness practices into my one-on-one work with individuals. So when I started learning about therapy, how to be present with my one-on-one clients, I found, oh, I have to be mindful with the person sitting in front of me. I have to listen in an attuned way. I have to really be there for them for it to really have the impact that therapy is meant to have. And then there's the practical mindfulness tools and strategies that, I often talk about the distinction between everyday mindfulness versus mindfulness meditation.
Mhm.
And everyday mindfulness could be literally like looking outside the window and noticing the tree leaves, noticing the squirrels, noticing the clouds, the sunshine, the raindrops. If you're outside, it could be feeling the wind, on your face. It could be touching water and noticing the temperature of it. If you're indoors doing the dishes, it's smelling the soap, it's feeling the texture of the sponge. Those moments day to day are moments of mindfulness when you are fully awake, so to speak. You are present, you are with whatever is happening in just this moment. So that's what I bring to my clients. And I help them take those moments and really appreciate them and notice how they feel and notice what's coming up for them. And then we have the mindfulness meditation practices. Those are the formal times that you as a person make a decision. I will sit and I will practice meditating. And the more I meditate, the more I'm able to be mindful and present in my day to day life. And when I sit down to meditate, I bring my life to the practice and I notice what shows up. And I say sit, you don't really have to sit. You can meditate in many different ways, but often a sitting practice is very common. And when you sit to meditate, you can practice being mindful with your breath, with your body, with any emotions that are coming up. But you can also be very intentional about different kinds of practices. I put different in quotes because anything can really become a meditation practice. It really depends on the intention behind it. So you can do a walking meditation practice, literally walking from your car to Target. And for the 2 minutes that it takes you to walk, that could be a mindful walking practice when you are noticing, how does my body feel in motion? Noticing putting one foot in front of the other, noticing people walking in front of you or almost getting hit by a car, and noticing what that feels like to you in that moment. So a lot of mindfulness is dropping those stories of what I thought should happen or should be or who I need to be as a person and just being present with what are things like actually right now in this moment. Who am I in this moment? What do I want? What do I think? What do I feel? What do I need? And what choice am I going to make? And so you asked how I bring that into my work with clients, and it's exactly by practicing answering those questions. So they practice the strategies of meditation, of the mindfulness day-to-day exercises, and then we apply them to the big life questions. Should I quit my job? What should I do next? Should I marry this person? Do I want to have children? What do I do with my aging parents? What do I do when somebody insulted me? I feel so much anger. And we practice answering those questions mindfully. And we talk about what they value, what's important to them as human beings. And we practice making choices based on those values. So for me, that's the interplay between mindfulness values and everyday decisions that we each get to make.
I love the way that you marry the idea of making decisions based on literally how you feel mentally and physically. I think that it's really difficult to separate our reaction from the story that we're telling ourselves about the situation first,
Mhm.
right? Like it's so easy to react when, I don't know, if my
Yeah.
husband says something that triggers me in a way,
Hmm.
there's a part of me that's like, he should know better and
Uh-huh.
should. And I react from that instead of like stepping back and pausing and saying, Evelyn, like, what's up? Why did that bother you
Hmm.
so much? What are you thinking? Like, where is this coming from? I feel like sometimes the story drives the reaction,
Hmm.
but
Absolutely.
right, the mindfulness actually can just create the pause
Yes.
that we need.
I was gonna say exactly that. Is that in order to say, well, wait a minute, hold on, that requires mindfulness. That requires even acknowledging that there is a choice and how you get to respond rather than reacting automatically based on instinct or reflex,
Yeah.
because that instinct or reflex most likely will be based on that story of he said this and that to me, he shouldn't have done that, who does he think I am or he is, or blah blah blah. And a lot of the mindfulness conversations that I have with people are about even learning to communicate mindfully with other people and
Mm.
with ourselves. Mindfulness enables you to realize what that story is that you are telling yourself. Because even how you started that sentence, right? He triggered me. There's a different way of phrasing that. He said such and such. That is a fact. And that is what I felt as
Yeah.
soon as he said that.
Yeah.
Also a fact.
Mhm.
He triggered me is a story.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. I love that. I love that. And I love that you're kind of speaking to something that I work with my clients about, with like recognizing even our reactions as
Mhm.
data, right? I feel like our reactions in any moment are just data, story that we were telling ourselves. So I work a lot with my clients around recognizing the story to be able to look at it as data, right? And then make
Mhm.
decisions or choices moving forward that are, I guess, more rooted in the pause, rooted in the mindfulness, and rooted in like feeling empowered instead of like
Yeah.
driven by that story of, well, this is just who I am, and that's how I react.
Yeah, because so many people, especially when they first come to see me, they say, well, there's no time. There's no time to change my reaction.
Mhm.
Like, he made me mad, so of course I had to throw my phone at him. We talk about, like, actually, there is that moment where you make that choice, where there was something that he said, there was something that you felt, and then the choice you took was to raise and throw the phone. Like, this choice, we can slow it down to what did you think when he first said that? And how
Mhm.
did that feel in your body? And what urge or craving did you have in that moment? And if you can break it down into those tiny, tiny steps over time, you give yourself that pause. And in that pause, you have a choice. And ideally, we want you to be making values-based choices.
Yeah. Do you think that it's easy to help people, women, understand what their true values are? Like, is it,
Mm,
I wonder if a lot of, I feel like the women that I speak to are have a value set, but
mhm,
a lot of times that set of values is not even theirs. It was given to them.
yes.
How do you
Uh,
help them start to see, instead of living the way just because they have, and that's because that's the way it's always been, how do you help them see or even identify what they really value and how to
mhm.
implementing that in their lives?
So it's funny you should ask because I actually have a values card sort that I pull out. It's literally on my desk so that when people say, how do I even know what I value? I say, well, I have a nifty little tool that we can use just like this. And I created this one, but there's tons online that people can do. And you basically start sorting different values. So there's different values words in here. So for example, fitness, self awareness, self worth, kindness, security, self respect, joy, humor. And I created one that has almost 100 different words in it. But a lot of times it's through hearing what people in general value that the woman sitting in front of me can start narrowing down her own. And they start prioritizing how important these values are in their life. And I give them prompts throughout the exercise, and I tell them these are not your mother's values. These are not the values that your grandma passed on to you. These are not the values that society tells you should be important to you. These are not your partner's values. So there are no shoulds here. It is literally, what do you consider important in this
Mhm.
moment in time? So it's not even what you used to value 5 years ago. It's not what you think you should value 10 years from now. It's what are your values right now? Because we can always come back to it and you can always adjust. These are not set in stone, even once you do narrow down your core values for right now. And the way that I explain it to my clients is that it makes sense for your values to shift throughout your life, right? So a 15-year-old teenage girl is not going to value the same thing that a 55-year-old woman is going to value.
Yeah.
And that's totally normal. Some things you might value throughout, but how you actually make choices based on those values might. Because
Mhm.
again, a 15-year-old who values her family might act in a very different way from a 55-year-old woman who values her family.
Mhm.
So a lot of times people think like, oh, mine and my husband's values are so different. Like maybe we should just get a divorce. And we have this conversation about, well, are they actually different? Or do you just make different choices based on the same values? And do the choices have to be right or wrong? Or is it just about what's right for you or what's even right for you in this moment versus any other moment? So, again, to me, bringing it back to mindfulness, the more mindful you are, the more deliberate you can be with the kinds of choices that you make,
Yeah.
which will then, in essence, determine the kind of person that you get to be.
Mhm. I love that perspective. And I even love the way you say it because it feels like you constantly have permission to just accept whatever you
Mm,
value in that moment, right?
yeah.
I think about Evelyn who got married a long time ago. And at that time, because my thinking about myself and life in general was so superficial, it was about checking the boxes, get
Hmm.
have the house, get along, be a good wife, right? All
Hmm.
things like though I feel like my values were in not intentionally, but they were really about creating a life that everyone else could be proud of, right? That they could look at me and
Yeah.
say, she's doing all the things. Where now my
Mm.
values are really rooted in who I am and who I get to be. And right, just the power of recognizing that self-reflection and self-evaluation is a gift. And I look forward to seeing like how that evolves even more over time.
Hmm.
But I love that idea of just being able to recognize that you constantly are growing and changing.
Hmm.
And I love the idea too that you said, when your husband and yourself or your partner and yourself are making different decisions, it doesn't necessarily mean that your values don't align. It just,
Hmm.
you have different ways of reaching the same end goal, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I love that perspective shift.
And when we do the core values assessment, I tell clients, like, I will read off the meaning that I have on the card for each value, but that's just my meaning. You can use your meaning, right? So, for example, for joy, I put to experience moments of pleasure or satisfaction because that's what I could fit on the card. You might have a very different definition of joy, and it's just as valid. That is your definition. And that's the point. Like, we want to find out what is important to you and what does that mean to you? And how do you express it? How do you communicate it? How do you embody it? Because you and I can both value joy, but our experience of joy will be different. Our embodiment of it will be different, and the choices that we make on it will be different.
Yeah. How do you help women start to see that literally creating more joy, more pleasure, happiness in life is possible? Because I feel like despite the work that they do outside of the home, a lot of women are
Hmm.
overwhelmed by the idea, or maybe in their mind it's a fact that their needs are not important, that
Mm,
they have to take care of their family first, that
yeah.
like doing things like, I don't know, resting and going for walks and having lunch with friends and sitting and reading a book, like those things are kind of selfish. How do you help women see that it can be different?
It's a challenge. It can be a challenge because so many of the women who come in to see me, they have those beliefs and they hold on to them very tightly. And we have to start slow. And I mean, I always tell my clients that the work progresses at your own pace. So if you want to go quickly, we can through things quickly. It doesn't mean that you'll get everything, and that's okay, but that will be the pace that you set. And if you need to slow down, we can slow down. And so sometimes people are surprised at the points where they do slow down because they will often choose to do the very hard tasks and what you might consider to be easy. So for example, like telling somebody like take a swim lesson this afternoon, right? Find some time, go take a swim lesson. It should be fun, right? If this is something that they mentioned that they want or enjoy doing, that will be harder for them than doing like 15 other assignments that I might have suggested to them, because that requires reprioritizing basically their entire life, not just the schedule for the day, but in their minds, reprioritizing their own level of importance compared to everything else that they were meant to do that day. And that takes that inner like strength and courage and power to say, I am worthy of doing something that's fun, that is just for me, that will bring me joy. And it is okay for me to potentially inconvenience other people. It's okay for me to give that gift to myself.
Mhm.
And like I said, it can be really challenging. And some women will say, okay, I commit to doing that. Because whatever I was doing before clearly wasn't working. I was yelling at my husband. I was yelling at my children. I was mad at the dog. I was resentful of it all. Right. And so they're like, okay, Alice told me to try going for a swim. I'm going to go for a swim. And like they take it on and they go with it. Other women might take months before they will ever like even do any research to find out where there's a swimming pool nearby, before they like open up Google Maps, before they look at the price, before they look at their schedule, because it's so hard to wrap around. Like, I will have to disrupt my life to make this happen. I will have to ask my husband to pick up the kids from school. I will have to ask the kids to like be in charge of their own lunch. I will blah, 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 blah. That mental rearranging, I think, takes a toll on a lot of women, that a lot of times, like, if we haven't already been doing the inner work, can be so challenging for them to overcome.
It's ironic to hear you say that, and I believe it because I know that I lived that for a long time. Like I will have to disrupt my whole life, my whole routine, my whole schedule. And really, that's exactly what I needed to disrupt my whole life and
Yeah.
my routine and my
Yeah.
schedule and my thinking. I had to disrupt every thought that I had. Like I
Yeah.
walked around in exhaustion and proud of it. Because in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, the more that I was exhausted, the more I was doing it right. Because that meant I was
Yeah.
taking care of everyone. I was doing my job. When really my actions led me to resent the life that I prayed for, the
Mm-hmm.
life that I was building, like to have all the boxes checked, right? And then to be sitting here like, are you kidding me? This is it? This is all I can
Mm-hmm.
feel? And it was really that it's just my
Mm-hmm.
perspective and my view of myself and what was impacting how I showed up in my life.
Because what we're talking about here is reconstructing your own identity.
Yes.
When you grow up thinking, I'm going to be a good mom, right? Like you have this certain idea of the steps that it takes and the boxes that you have to check. Like you have to make a certain amount of money, you have to do a certain amount of work, you have to be a good homemaker and a housewife, and you have to tend to your husband and whatever other bullshit you grew up with, right? Which we all grew up with because this is the society we live in, right?
Yeah.
And you form this identity. And then when you check off the boxes and you get the promotion and you put food on the table and your husband tells you how amazing you are, and then you realize, then why do I still feel like crap? And
Mhm.
it's because you realize that you've been making these choices based on what you thought would make you happy without actually considering what you need to be happy. And you asked a question earlier about like how overwhelming it can be for some women. And actually, when they start doing this work, they realize that it's tiny shifts here and there that can make all the difference in how you feel. And sometimes there is a big overhaul that needs to be done in how you structure your life and how you prioritize yourself. But other times it's like, well, if I just ask my husband to pick up the kids on such and such day, then I have 2 hours to go and do a swim class. And then I come home in time for dinner, and then he brings back the kids from art class, and we can have dinner as usual around the table. So, really, it's instead of overhauling my entire life, I just need to make room for these 2 hours or 1 hour or whatever it is that I get to do something for myself. And I am so much happier and I'm so much less resentful. And I show up better for my kids and my husband and the dog because I feel joy and gratitude for this life I've built for myself.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
often don't even have to take away like all of those boxes that you checked. They can bring you that happiness and fulfillment that you thought, as long as you make room that you are for making those choices that you do find fulfilling right now. Maybe
Yeah.
you never knew you needed that swim class.
Mhm.
And now that you've taken it, you realize I want to do this on a weekly basis. And that brings you so much joy from those 2 hours, and it changes your perspective on the rest of your life.
Yes. Yeah. I think, too, I just was thinking about the fact that change in itself feels scary and overwhelming because I think we do
Mhm.
believe that it has to be drastic and dramatic and huge.
Yeah.
But when I think about, the woman that I was and the woman that I am, that happened slowly over time, like one minor decision at a time. And it had to start with having some real, honest, difficult conversations with myself first, right? I
Mhm.
don't even think that I recognized how much I was living life in a should bubble and had no idea what I even desired, had no idea what brought me joy, right? Like it was just about, I was so focused on living the life that I had in my head that I was supposed to
Mhm.
live that I didn't take the time to know me enough to know if that's even what I
Yeah.
wanted. But I do feel like if I could evaluate, I don't know, in this 8 to 10 year time span, I have changed so much, but so intentionally and so slowly, where none of it feels dramatic. It just
Yeah.
feels like, but this is who I am, right? And I
Yeah.
get to continue to choose who I get to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I feel like that releasing the idea that it has to be drastic and quick
Yeah.
and
Or look a certain way.
yeah, that feels forced.
Yeah.
And that like immediately brings up resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, what you're describing to me is having that sense of freedom. And I use the word freedom a lot in both my businesses because I do believe that the work that we do helps women like us feel more free. Because when you are mindfully, intentionally, deliberately making the choices in your life, that is freedom.
Yeah.
Because when you were chasing after something just because someone else told you you should, that's not freedom. That's
Mhm.
being stuck, being trapped, doing
Yeah.
something because someone else told you to. When
Bondage.
you start, yeah, when you start asking yourself, well, what do I actually want? Do I
Mhm.
have the ability to get it? Do I still want it? How does it feel when I have it? That is freedom. And even knowing and noticing that you have the freedom to change your mind. I
Yeah.
went after this job that I realized actually I don't want anymore. Maybe a
Mhm.
past version of me did, but present me doesn't. What does present me want? How
Mhm.
do I think it will make me feel? Okay, let me make choices to get it. And then I get to evaluate again. Do I still want it? Does it still make me happy?
Yeah.
And that's the way that our brain kind of works. It will always chase in a way after the next thing. And that's not a bad thing. Like, in a way, that's life. We get something, we go after the next thing. I think mindfulness enables us to pause and actually allow ourselves to experience like both the journey of going for it as well as like the feeling of achievement or fulfillment of having it, and
Yeah.
then mindfully deciding what is next for me, not for
Mhm.
anyone else, for me. And how
Yeah.
does that fit in basically with everything else we've been talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like what's standing out to me most in our conversation is just the power of pause. I mean, truly, you could,
Yeah.
anything that you're reacting to, any feeling that you're having deserves the pause, right? It
Yeah.
just like, if I am irritated by something that one of my kids did, I deserve the pause, but so do they, right? When I
Yeah.
pause and I connect with myself and what is it that's actually bothering me, the mother that they receive in turn is totally different, right? Then I'm not
100%.
reactive, I'm not yelling, I'm not irritated. I am instead curious. Like,
Yes.
what is going on? Let me help
That's
you.
why curiosity is one of the major factors of mindfulness,
Mhm.
because the more curious, in a curious way you can approach something, the less likely you are to have like negative judgments towards it, anger, frustration, irritability, because it's coming from a place of curiosity. Well, what is actually going on? I'm not assuming that I know what's going on, and nothing should go on this way or that. There's just what is. And if I'm curious, I get to discover what is and choose how I respond to that.
Yeah, I feel like curiosity in general is one of the things that I feel like has helped every relationship that I'm in.
Mhm.
Parents, husband, children, friendships, coaching, myself, right? Like
Yeah.
even just looking at it just from the perspective of marriage, to look at my husband and be able to ask questions without criticism attached
Hmm.
is different, right? And
Hmm.
even releasing myself of shoulds, like literally released him of shoulds. He doesn't
Yeah.
have to be the man I had in my mind. He just has to be
Hmm.
the man that he is, right?
Yeah.
And he gets to, like, it goes from forcing things to happen in our relationship to actually just existing together and like choosing joy for ourselves as individuals so that we show up as whole people.
Yeah.
It's it's
Yeah.
it's a total shift, that pause, that
Mm.
curiosity, that questioning, and that releasing the shoulds, because when you
Yeah.
release yourself, you release everybody around you.
And like the sort of cliche phrase that keeps coming to mind is meeting yourself where you are and meeting other people where they are.
I love it. With no judgment, right? Like I
Yeah.
look at where I know that I am really focused on growth and elevation mentally and emotionally, but also I can look at anyone in front of me and recognize that their path is not my business,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and recognizing that they're on their own path, their
Yes.
own journey, and
Mhm.
it can look totally different from yours. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes that can be really challenging. And of course, I believe mindfulness can help us with that as well. But it's recognizing this is where I am, this is what I need, this is how I feel. And literally every other person has that for themselves.
Yeah.
And it is not up to me to like bring them up to speed or like force them to be where I am, because maybe that's not their path, that's not their journey. And can I hold love and acceptance and presence with that as well and
Right.
not make it wrong or bad?
I feel like because yes, we don't recognize it, but in those moments when we are thinking like that, like they should be thinking like this, they
Hmm.
should be doing this, we are literally making our love conditional.
Yeah,
Love
yeah,
you so long as you are reaching to who I think you should be, or you should be getting to where I think you should be. And it really takes away from the grace and compassion that they need as human beings. Just like,
absolutely.
just
And
to,
compassion is such a big one, right? I think compassion, it's so important for us to have compassion towards ourselves. And a lot of people don't realize that the more compassionate they are towards themselves, the more compassionate they're going to be towards other people. Like you said, so many of these women are caretakers, and it's important for them to be there for others and to prioritize, husband, child, dog, whomever. But the more they can prioritize themselves, the better they are going to show up for those other people and the kinder they are going to be towards them. Because if like there's the type of woman, right, she will put everyone else first and she will drop and she will get sick and she will still say like, well, but I did it for you. No, you are suffering for me. That is what you are doing. And so self-compassion can actually alleviate that pain and suffering and bring you more joy and other people more joy. And it can help you be around for longer. I think that ultimately, like, that's one of the perks, if you can call it that, of mindfulness as well. Like, you get to be that better version of yourself for yourself, and other people get to have that as well.
I love it. I love it because that, I mean, really, like we're here, right, for a certain amount of time. We don't get a do-over. It speaks to being able to choose the quality of your life,
Yeah.
right? Instead of just like trying to focus on longevity.
Absolutely. Quality of life is so important.
Mhm.
It's almost like For me, this is going to sound quite morbid, but mindfulness and death come hand in hand.
Mhm.
Because I practice mindfulness a lot at this point in my life, I am acutely aware that your life can end like that. And I never want to have the experience of, I wish that I only, or like I should have, or I didn't have enough time to. And that's why it's so important to reflect in every moment. Who am I now? What do I want now? How do I feel now? What choices can I make now? Because we have a limited amount of time. And I care about the quality of that time. And so many people, I think, only become aware, become mindful, like temporarily when something bad happens.
Yeah.
If there's a car accident or a death or like a natural disaster, then they realize how fragile life is. And one of the things that I say, kind of in jest, but not really, is that I'm not waiting for a disaster to hit before I improve the quality of my life. If there is something that I can do now to live a happier life, why wouldn't I do that now? What am I going to wait for? I don't need for somebody to die to make me realize how much I appreciate them. I'm going to appreciate them now.
Yes, yes, and more yes, yes. I love this. Alice, I love this conversation and I love just knowing that every time we talk about these things freely, we free more women. Just in recognizing that there is more available to them,
Hmm.
they can still take very good care of their families, but also in prioritizing themselves, they can have a life that is rooted in more just ease and connection. Like I said in the beginning in our intro, and permission to just be, right? Like not chasing all the shoulds and just being, right? There's so much possibility there, but
Yeah.
it definitely starts with that awareness and the mindfulness and the pause and the
And literally just tiny moments of it.
tiny moment.
Like, you don't need 2 hours on top of a mountain every day to experience this. You get to do it in 30-second increments when you
Mhm.
do the dishes, when you look out the window, when you're walking from the car to the store. It's really that moment where you are just present
Yeah,
with what is. And just to leave your audience with something who might not necessarily know, like, well, how do I be? How do I do this being? For me, it really comes down to the five senses. And that's the fastest way to be present in this moment is to notice, what can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? What can I touch? Because you experience your senses in this moment. And there's no other way they can or should be other than how you experience them right now.
yeah. Amazing. I love it. Alice, thank you so much for being here today. You know that I cannot let you go without two things. So first, I'd like to know if people ever wanted to reach out to you, want to learn more about mindfulness, more about your coaching, where could they find you?
So togethermindful.com is my mindfulness business where you can learn how to practice mindfulness, how you can identify your core values. I actually have the core values assessment that I do with clients right there. Anybody can take it from home. Whether or not you're interested in meditation, like I always tell people that mindfulness doesn't just mean meditation. So you can learn to be just a more mindful, conscious human being from those tiny moments of practicing mindfulness day to day. And so I have a free mindfulness toolkit that people can sign up for right now on togethermindful.com.
Awesome.
And if anybody happens to be in New York or Florida and they're interested in my therapy services, that's dralicrizzi.com.
Awesome. And I will make sure to link everything that you're offering in the show notes because I think that also there's something about coaching and even reaching out with a psychologist, one or the other. There's something about knowing that the person on the other end is just there to hold space
Mhm.
and not formulate any judgment that just makes it feel like something more comfortable and safe. So I love that
Absolutely.
there are, two avenues that people could work with you with because I think that that's important.
Yeah. And I always tell people, like, come as you are. I have no preconceived notions about what the person in front of me is going to be like. So you
Mhm.
might as well show up as yourself and we will take it from there. And that's where we get to work on meet yourself where you are. That's
Yeah,
where we always start.
yeah. Awesome. And of course, the question of the hour is, in the Minding Mind community, we're all about being intuitive and instinctual and releasing everybody else's stories of who you're supposed to be and start living life the way you actually desire to, right? That's yours. That's what's yours. So how do you feel that minding yours impacts the legacy that you'll leave?
So for me, it comes back to everything that you and I have spoken about in this hour, and it's about just being mindful and present with your own values. If you can make choices based on what's most important to you, that will be the legacy that you leave. That will be the impact because you will then show up authentically as a conscious human being, and that will impact every person that you interact with. You said something earlier just about touching other people's lives, like just by being ourselves. If I'm making choices based on my values, then I am being the kind of person that I want to be. And I know that I am interacting with other people in that way. And then they can model that to people in their lives, and they have permission to be this way in their life. And then they are more joyous and happy and fulfilled. And they pass that on to their children. So that is the ripple effect that we get to have when we are minding ours.
Yes, yes, it's a ripple. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Is change happens that way. I love it. Alice, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you everyone else for joining us both for this conversation and tuning into another episode of Minding Mind. If this episode resonated with you, please make sure to comment, rate, and review the podcast. Your feedback always helps me grow. And until next time, I want you to go live your life on your terms and please mind your business. We'll catch you in the next episode.